Okay, friends, is everyone already following at Junk Gypsy and at The Wander Inn on Instagram? If not, scoot on over. I'll wait. I have spent the last decade admiring the talent of Junk Gypsy. Clothes, boots, jewelry, antiques. They're a little hard to pin down, a little airless, a little mapless, throwbacks, visionaries, but definitely creative misfits. And I thought that I loved everything there was to love about Junk Gypsy, but then I went and stayed at their farmhouse, and now I am completely speechless. Almost. I wasn't completely sure when I was there I was in heaven, but then they gently tapped on the door in the morning and they brought me warm biscuits. Go, you guys. It would be so perfect for a girls' weekend. Go visit their store in Round Top. Go find their website at gypsyville.com. Follow them on Instagram at Junk Gypsy and at The Wander Inn. You won't be disappointed. Hello, and welcome to Center State Sister, a podcast where we search our hearts and explore our joy, shake our fists, tell our stories, whatever the day might call for. If you enjoy today's conversation, please consider subscribing. I hope that you hear something that lets you know you are loved and helps you love one another. Welcome to Center State Sister. When I lived in Japan, there was this very famous bridge that people would visit and tour and eat lunch by. It was a very picturesque Japanese scene, the cherry blossoms, the ancient architecture, the girlfriends and boyfriends having dates there. And there was this tower that you could hike up to at the top of a very steep hill if you were feeling adventurous. And at night, they would light this tower up. So much so that no matter where you were in the city, you could see this great light. I lived in Japan for 3 years, and when it was time to come back to the United States, that last night that I was there, I went back to the familiar scene to take it in one last time. And it occurred to me, maybe for the first time, what Jesus might have meant when he talked about the city on the hill in Matthew. A city on the hill when darkness falls around us. A city requires more than just one light, doesn't it? We matter in a story bigger than just our own. We have to shine together, work together, speak love together in order to be a city lit up for the benefit of those who might be in the dark. In that sermon where Jesus references the city on a hill, Jesus is contrasting the way of life that is built on something other than him. And in that sermon, he is exhorting these people to listen. Often you can hear Jesus saying, "You have heard it said, but what I say to you is this." And in that way, he's trying to show us a new way. We talk about being a city on a hill, being a city within our city, and wanting to be a faithful witness to God's character and his glory here in this garden of a town, Bryan College Station, that we love. And one of the things that people should peer in and say is, so that's what their God is like. One of the most visible ways to monitor who he is through our generosity. And generosity, it's not something that God does and practices, but instead generosity is who God is, and we are made in his image. As Christians, we believe that every human is created in God's image and likeness, and that is worth protecting, that is worth serving, that is worth sacrificing for. Regarding the ills of this world, as Christians, we might grieve and say, "Thy kingdom come." As Christians, we might come together and cry out to the Lord that we want to bring a little bit of his kingdom here on earth. And he responds, "Go ahead." He doesn't want to change this world without us. There's a story in scripture where Jesus is in a house and the house is so packed that nobody can come through the door anymore. And so the people, they open the roof and they lower a paralytic down through the roof so that Jesus can heal him. Now, the focus of the story is obviously on the healing, on what Jesus did. As it should be. But for a moment, just a moment, can we look at something different? How amazing is it that there is a group of people who are ripping the roof off of a place so that someone in need outside can be let in? And when I think of those brave friends lowering their friend, I'm amazed by their commitment. It would have been perfectly reasonable to look at their buddy and say, "Sorry, dude, place is packed. I'm sure it'll be back. Maybe next time." But they didn't. And amazingly, it wasn't the paralytic's man's faith that impressed Jesus. It was the faith of his friends. When Jesus saw their faith, he said, "Friend, your sins are forgiven." Jesus responded to their generosity and healed their friend. Our generosity, our faith, our cooperation with the Holy Spirit's lead impacts the lives of others. Our generosity can lead others right to Jesus' saving power. My friend Blake Jennings is ripping roofs off of places all over Bryan College Station by gifting cars to people in need through his nonprofit called OnRamp. In this episode, you will hear about poverty and its destruction, the dire need for transportation and the ripple effects of not having it, and the important work of OnRamp to step in and make transformative changes in people's lives. I believe that God has placed us on this earth to work and to earn and to use our gifts and to care for the people that He has entrusted to us and devote ourselves to a radical brand of generosity that changes lives and leaves a legacy and lights up a city. Blake Jennings makes Bryan College Station shine just a little brighter through OnRamp. I can't wait for you to hear all about it. Safe to Save is an app that rewards safe driving. Do you find yourself wanting the peace of mind that comes with knowing where your family is, but not wanting to be that mom that's always asking, "Where are you? Are you there yet? How long will you be there?" With Safe to Save fam, you can have the comfort of knowing that your people are safe. You can see where they are, you can see how safely they're driving, and you can even receive notifications when they have arrived safely at their destination. Equip your family today with tools and knowledge needed to make sure that everyone arrives safely while receiving sweet rewards for not teching and driving. Restaurants like Jersey Mike's, McDonald's, Schlotzsky's, Chick-fil-A, La Madeleine, Smoothie King, all of them offering free food that motivate you and your family to not tech and drive. Start with 500 free points by entering the code Allison when downloading. Download Safe to Save today. Safe, 2, save. Yay! Blake, I'm so excited that you said yes and that you were able to come on.
I'm surprised that you seem like you're surprised that I say yes.
Well, I just feel like the world has been so heavy and dark, and we so desperately need stories of hope and possibility. So I really, really appreciate you. I have had a blast following your work. We actually met for the first time handing out milk during the pandemic. Well, actually, it's still the pandemic, but handing out milk during quarantine. But I had been following along quite a while before that, and I just feel like we live in a world that desperately needs examples like yours. And you have committed your life to using your gifts to serving your community and doing eternal things. So I really just can't thank you enough for being here. I feel like you use every single thing you have, whether it's leading and teaching or inspiring people or serving or evangelizing, whatever it is, whatever gift it is that you're using at the time, you really know what it is to run with the Lord. And I cannot wait for listeners to hear from you and about you and all of the amazing things that you're doing. We're here to talk about how God has called you to be the best disciple you can be and the best community member that you can be. And that is through something called OnRamp. And so, like I said, I'm so excited for all of us to hear the details of that. But just from the very beginning, let's just start with who you are and who you love and what you love. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. You can make me blush, Allison, with that very kind introduction. So, well, my name is Blake Jennings. As you mentioned, I grew up not far from here in Tomball, about an hour south. So I've always been a Texas boy, other than a brief trip up in the East Coast for a little while doing engineering work, actually, up there. So my story is really odd. I thought I would be an engineer, honestly, from about 3 years old, as young as you could be and have a concept of it. My grandfather and my dad both worked for NASA. My grandfather, when I knew him, he had a farm and we'd walk around it, and he had parts off of old rockets, intercontinental missiles and stuff like that laying around the farm. So I grew up around that. And then
my goodness,
he and my dad, like, we would always, like, we were working on tractors or working on cars or building model airplanes and flying around and stuff like that. So that was, so I've always had a real need to build stuff with my hands and to be out in the garage and working on stuff. So I did that for the first half of my life, really through about 22, 23 years old. It was all engineering and building stuff. And it was about 25 that I started, I had been serving in a church up in the DC area and volunteering, and more I was asked to teach. It just was a kind of another gift set that I had. And I noticed that there was a big need for it, and it resonated with my heart as well. So I started to chase that and kind of set down the engineering stuff and the building stuff, and did ministry and really enjoyed that. And then I think it's really been in the last 5 or 6 years that I've realized I kind of feel like I'm at a point in my life where I want to find some way to combine those things because one of them's laid
Yeah.
dormant for a long time. But it was a part of who I was as a child, and I think it's still part of me now. So,
Yeah.
so stuff that I love. I do love teaching. I love opportunities to communicate, but I also really love being alone in the garage with a socket wrench and some part that needs to be fixed. So, I was up till 10:30 last night fixing one of my cars. So,
Uh-huh.
that will so those two things and ideally I love them in balance. Other things that I love my wife, I love my kids. I got twins, they're 11 years old, and I try to get them in the garage as much as I can. We built a go-kart together and they're out on that a
Oh,
lot, which
cool.
is fun for me. So yeah, those are things that I love.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So, okay, you have founded OnRamp. Tell us what made you do that.
So in my garage, when I would work on stuff, when people found out that at the church, as I was a pastor up at Grace Bible Church, that I knew how to fix cars, there were a lot of folks who struggled financially, particularly some of our younger staff members who were maybe new out of college.
Right.
And they were driving cars that were often older and needed some work. And so I offered to try to fix their cars if I could. So they bring them over, and we just kind of had one of the sides of the garage. I'd bring in their cars and work on them and fix them if I could. Over time, that developed into a broader opportunity for the community to bring me folks. And particularly, my wife and I started seeing folks come out of our youth impact ministry, which is kind of near and dear to our hearts at Grace Bible Church. And so, Youth
Yes.
Impact is a ministry that particularly focuses on elementary and like youth kids from under resourced families in our community. And the ministry is focused on the kids, but as often happens in good ministries, it ends up building relationships with the parents. And a lot of the
Sure.
parents were single parents or were coming out of situations of maybe generational poverty or some kind of acute need in their life. And so those youth impact leaders were like, hey, we know a guy who can fix your car when it's broken down if you can't afford it. And so they started to
Yeah.
bring me their cars as well. And so I would try to fix them, but as tends to happen with older cars, sometimes you can't fix them and they just need to be done. And so I'd tell them,
Yeah.
I'd have a conversation with a single mom, your car's down. Maybe can I help you find a new car? And I found out she has no money and she still owes $8,000 on this car that's worthless because some sleazeball sold her a horrible vehicle. And that happens every day. That happens. I was telling somebody the other day, if you go onto Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist right now, I can guarantee you over half the ads you'll see are scams or are lying to you. That at the minimum, they're just leaving out important information. At the worst, there's no car. It's an utter lie.
Right.
So
Wow.
they're all over. So we started seeing those. There's one in particular who ended up being the first on ramp client. Her name was Marlo, and she was scammed and left with a car that was worthless and a significant debt on it that she had to pay. It's very hard to get out of car note debts. So Julie and I, my wife Julie and I, we started strategizing. What do we do? I kept the car running for about a year. I mean, using duct tape when I had to. I mean, it's just anything I could find to keep it moving down the road, but it wasn't reliable at all. No AC. It's a single mom of 4 kids. 2 were special needs kids. I mean, it was a really tragic situation. And so we realized this isn't a repair situation. This isn't a duct tape situation.
Yes.
We need to step up and we need to find a way to replace it and make her whole again, make her right. As if this, really is a theft when somebody's scamming like that, as if this theft didn't happen. So we set up OnRamp to gift a vehicle to Marlo. Was really was never we never had in mind what has become. It was
Yeah.
more of a one-off thing. I'm a
This way.
pastor.
Yeah.
That's what I do most of
Yeah.
the time. So we'll just do these occasionally when we have
Caring for Marlo. Yeah. The
caring
person
for
God put in
Marlo,
front of
and
you.
yeah, exactly. So it's going to be here and there. We had the ability through friends and connections to set it up as a 501c3 even from the beginning of like, hey, even if it's one Marlo a year, let's do it right. So we set that up, and that was the birth of OnRamp. And then everything that's happened since was just the fact that when we started with Marlo, within a month we had raised 5 times the amount of money we expected, and we had found there were more clients than we could count who were in
Right.
similar situations. And so it just exploded from there.
Wow. Okay, so you made a really brave decision to make this your full-time work, and I would imagine that came at a cost. I imagine that that was a really big risk for you and your family. How did you make that decision?
Um, it it is a risk, yes. It was a risk that we got to a place where we could not take, if it
Mm,
makes sense. So
mhm.
so the transition, stepping out of my pastoral role, I stepped out in July, so that'd be 4 months ago now. But the decision was made a year before that, so that would be June, 15 months ago. But I've wanted to for probably a few years, and part of it is just like I said earlier. I mean, I think God made me in a certain way with a mixture of some odd things that most people don't come from automotive engineering, and then they're a teaching pastor, and that blend. So I've just really wanted to chase after this. I feel like it's a unique fit for me. I believe very strongly that there are many really solid churches in our community. There's great teaching pastors,
Yeah,
many of them. That's easier to fill that hole, if you will. It's easier to replace me. In other words, I'm not
right.
very essential there. I can do something, but there's many others who can do it and do it very well. So I felt less essential there. Whereas with OnRamp, at least from all this research that we've done, there's nobody else doing this. So at least in this area, and very few in the country. And so there was a sense of, for the last few years, since I really want to chase this and I need to chase this because there's not other people chasing this and it
Yeah.
needs to be done. And the Lord has raised up people to do the other thing I do. Like he's got the people ready.
Yes.
So that desire was there for a long time, but there is the reality of I have a wife and kids and I have a mortgage
Yeah.
and I have all those things. So
Yeah.
that led to what I said. We just kind of were exploring that, trying to get a sense of like, what is this something we should do? It's a big, scary thing, and it's still big and scary on a daily basis. But what actually was the final straw? There's like, now is the time. Push go was so May and June of 15, 16 months ago. That was really the beginning of the pandemic, and I think that was the moment. Oh, it's kind of hard to remember, even though it's not that long ago. So much
It's
has
all a
happened in the
blur.
world.
Yeah.
It felt like May. So the lockdown started end of April, or into March, is into spring break. It felt like May was when everybody realized this isn't a 6 week deal.
Right.
This
Flattening the
isn't like
curve for
a
2 weeks. Yeah.
yeah. It's like no. This is going to go on for a while. And so because I was knee deep in the world of charity and with OnRamp and the other charities that we work with, there was just this dawning moment of like, okay, we've got people running out, like getting food to people, getting housing, getting
Yeah.
clothes to people, but everybody's doing it in like this is 4 to 6 weeks way. Like, let's just, we'll throw some water on the fire and it'll be fine. I think there's a sense of me of no, this is going to be big. It's going to be a long time. It may be generational. There's a huge need for help, and I want to do that.
Yeah.
But I had a sermon to preach that Sunday. I was like, oh, now is it like I don't want to preach this, or I need to go, like I need
Oh,
to find a
wow.
way
It
to
felt like a
give.
holy desperation
Yeah,
to
I was like,
to
yeah,
move.
and just the idea of like I have to do this. There's people who can't put food on the table, and this isn't going to go away tomorrow. Like this is
Yeah.
endemic, and the coronavirus is not, it's not changing the field. It's just opening our eyes to the need that's
Wow.
out there, and so that was the thing. And so, yeah, it was a Saturday. I was preaching the next day, and my boss and I are talking, and he can tell the frustration and just angst in
Yes.
me. And he asked, "So are you wanting to keep doing this?" And it just is as a moment. It's like, no, I need to
This
go do
yeah,
this other
oh,
thing. So, I mean, it still took a year, or it took a year and a month to,
sure.
because I wanted to wrap up really well. I don't want to
Of
leave in
course,
a
to
way that
leave
was really good for
responsibly.
everybody.
Sure.
Yeah, and help the church in its next phase. But that was a moment, just a Saturday of feeling like I need to go do this. So that's what
Wow.
finally brought, I guess. I mean, bravery is less the description, more desperation. I'm just saying,
Yeah.
I can't do
Yeah, I
another sermon.
feel
I got to
that.
go do this other
I
thing.
love that, and I feel like a lot of times it's when we're desperate that the Lord can best showcase his work. It's like,
Yeah,
watch this, watch all these opportunities unfold because the Lord loves faithfulness. So answering that holy tug or
Mhm.
that nudge, that holy nudge that says, "Do it. I've got this." Oh, I love it so much. So Jesus, while on the cross, said, "I thirst." And when I meditate on just those two words alone, when I'm in the right space or when I'm in the right frame of mind, it can completely undo me. It can like just absolutely bring me to tears.
Mhm.
It had been a long, just he had lost a lot of blood. He was in excruciating pain, all this mental anguish. And in his
Mhm.
desperation, he utters this most basic of needs, you
Mhm.
know? And I realize I listen to that and I think of that and I'm meditating on that. And I have this um, really helpless feeling that there's nothing I can do about that. You know, that moment has passed and there's nothing I can do about that. Um, but when I take that to prayer and when I continue that uncomfortable meditation of feeling helpless in that moment, um, every single time it comes to me, Lord, when did I see you hungry? When did I
Yeah.
see you thirsty? When did I visit you in jail? When did I clothe you? And the answer is that truly, truly, I say to you, what you did to the least of this, you did it of his, you did to me. And so, and I
Mhm.
realized that, I'm not so helpless after all.
Mhm.
There are things that we can do right here and now to bring thy kingdom come, to bring
Mhm.
a little bit of heaven here on earth. I would love to know, because I know that we don't know, like just
Mhm.
how much transportation is an issue. How
Mhm.
deep does this go? Something that seems simple to us. I helped out at the Elizabeth House Maternity Home
Mhm.
for maybe a 3-year stretch, and so much of what I did day after day was providing rides to and from
Yep.
daycare, to and from work. So,
Yep.
tell us a little bit about the just reliable transportation in U.S., Texas, what have you,
Yeah.
locally.
Um, so it is a desperate need. When we go out there and research the data and look to see how significant is this, there are fortunately quite a few studies that have been done in about the last 15 to 20 years on the impact of having or not having reliable transportation. And across the board, it ends up being consistently one of the top two or three causes of long-term poverty in the life of a family's
Right.
loss of a vehicle. And there was a particular article done back in 2006 on research that identified it was going through what are if you're gonna pull certain levers in a person's life, what are the ones that are going to make the biggest impact down the road?
Yeah.
And so the fascinating thing and kind of the quote that we pulled out of it, because it just blew us away, is that from their research they found that in the United States, reliable transportation has a bigger impact on a family's long-term economic and employment prospects than having an education. And they're talking like just high school education. So
Wow.
it is more likely to change a family's long-term path economically, whether they remain in poverty or rise out of poverty, to get them a reliable vehicle than to help the parents finish a high school education. Which that doesn't at all mean don't finish the education. Like education is
Right,
still
right.
vital, but just to step back and I would have never thought about a vehicle being that big of an impact on a family's long-term
Yeah.
prospects that it trumps even education in terms of
Wow.
helping them be employed and be financially stable. So the more that we've looked at that, the more we've seen that verified. It kind of anecdotally we think about it, and if we step back and we put ourselves in the shoes of somebody who can't afford reliable transportation, it does make sense. And I think that it's one of those that like you gather the data and the data is overwhelming, but the data doesn't touch you quite as much as asking like case studies, like particular people, like what exactly does it mean when we say they don't have a reliable vehicle, and why is that such a big deal? And the issue is um, whether we have ever stopped to realize it or not, every good thing in our lives that we're connected to comes in some way through transportation in our community. That's not true across the world. There's many communities in the
Yeah.
world that are not built around the car. But all of
Right.
America, with the exception of really like New York City and San Francisco, was built around a car as the
Wow.
basic unit of family mobility. And so as a result, anytime a family needs to access education, healthcare,
Yep.
employment, churches and religious services, grocery stores, government services, All of those things come through a vehicle. And so in some places, cities have stepped up and provided trains or buses to be the vehicle, so mass transit. But that is not true anywhere in Texas. Even where we have mass transit, it is not at all effective mass transit. It's more like get middle
Okay.
class people to the airport kind of deal. It
Yeah,
doesn't come
right.
anywhere close to meeting the need for particularly those who don't have vehicles, who are impoverished. In our part of the world, in our part of southern United States, Midwest, other than the coast, really, families cannot access those vital services without a reliable vehicle. So, anyways, getting to specific stories. So we gave a kind of a way to think about this in our county, and really in our whole area. So the Brazos Valley, no one in this area who needs a transplant can get on the transplant list unless they can demonstrate that they own a reliable vehicle.
Oh,
So if you're in dialysis waiting for a kidney, the transplant committee will not accept you to get a kidney until you can verify you have reliable transportation. So why is that? Well, because with a transplant, you have to get to a transplant grade hospital multiple occasions on very specific dates and times, or you could lose the organ. And we don't have one of those hospitals in our county. You have to go to Temple or Houston. So 7 of our clients who've given a vehicle to, the vehicle was the contingent piece to get them on the transplant list. So they could get on a
my
kidney list by
goodness.
having a vehicle. So you, in your family, you have to be able to show, I have a vehicle that I can get. So
So to be clear, on ramp has served someone with that description that you have specifically
yes,
helped someone.
7.
Wow.
Yeah. So the
Oh,
last one was last week, 23-year-old kid who's on dialysis and qualifies for a kidney in Houston, and they would not accept him until he had a vehicle. So we gave him a vehicle, and so he's headed down to Houston now to get a kidney.
my
So that's one of
goodness.
those things people just don't think of it. So you have to have a car to get a kidney. Yes, yeah,
That
you
is
do. In
so
our
very
community.
pro-life of you. This is incredible.
I think it just goes to show that there's connection. A vehicle is not a convenience. A vehicle is a necessity for
Right,
modern life in
right.
most of the United States. So
Mhm.
another example, of course, everybody thinks employment. Our second client was a woman who she was rescued out of a horrible situation. She got a job, and the fascinating thing is, I mean, we think about people we want to help. We want to help people who are doing what they can with what they have. Well, she walked. I don't recall which. She walked from her home to the hospital, which was like 3.4 miles away. So she walks there. She walks home. And the thing is fascinating is like, okay, well, I guess I could walk 3.4 miles. Yeah, you got to walk 3.4 miles and then be professional. Like you have to, like
Right.
you don't get to show up soaked.
In
Like you don't get to show up
Texas,
smelling in
right.
Texas. And so then people are like, well, what about Uber? Can you use Uber? Well, the reality is that if you don't make more than like 15 to $20 an hour, Uber is going to use up all your money. If you're
Yeah,
using it it uses up it's very expensive. It's a wonderful tool for the middle class and above, but it's not feasible for people who are just making it to use it daily. So she had no ability for that. And then the related thing with her is she had a young daughter who she was taking to daycare. So she pushed the stroller like 1.5 miles along country roads with no sidewalk. She would push this stroller in rain and heat and whatever, 1.5 miles, drop her daughter off, walk the rest of the way to the hospital, then walk the rest of the way, pick her daughter up and take her home. But that's the reality in our country. If you don't have a reliable vehicle, that's the life that you live. And
right.
when she had to get to the store, it was more miles than that to get to Walmart. So she'd walk 3 to 4 miles to get to Walmart, get her groceries, and have to walk back with her child and all her groceries. And so all of the access that we take for granted to those things, and so it affects health, it affects employment, it affects church for those of us who care deeply about our religious connection, our religious community.
Yeah.
Religious community, if you want to be with them, you have to drive there, or they're going to come pick you up. It's wonderful when that happens, but usually take advantage of church, youth group, all the different things that a church provides. You have to be able to somehow get there. We have
Right.
multiple clients who they we gave them the vehicle, and the vehicle was the first time they ever got to go to one of their children's extracurricular activities. So we had a woman whose son had
Wow.
played football for years, never been to one of his games because the
Oh,
school will get the kid there. The school won't get the parents
sure.
there.
Sure.
So, so again, it's that sense of a vehicle is connected to all of these things that we deeply care about: parenting, healthcare, employment, church, education, nutrition. A lot of data out there that people are struggling nutritionally because they don't have a vehicle to get out of the food desert that they live in to more healthy
Right.
options.
Right.
Just everything that we rely on. And so, anyways, I don't know how long to go on this, but
No, this is
when
so
you think
wonderful.
about the need for a vehicle is what gives a family access to all the other things that a community provides. So if you want to provide for a struggling family free food at a food bank, okay, but they have to get there. If you
Right.
want to provide for them early head start for their kids, great, but you have to get them there. If you want to
Mhm.
provide celebrate recovery to help them if they're dealing with an addiction, great, you got to get there. So all of the things that we want to to bless a family with a person with, ultimately in our part of the world, they come through a reliable car, and you have no access to them without.
Absolutely incredible. I thought I was celebrating before that you're doing this. My goodness, the things that I've never considered or thought of. I have zero desire to be negative in any way, but I am curious if you receive any pushback about how you choose who gets a car. I feel like
Mhm.
so often, sometimes in religious circles in particular, there can be some sort of spiritual arrogance where I don't know. It's like this certain group of people should not have what I
Mhm.
have unless they behave like I behave.
Yeah.
And of course, as I even say that out loud, I'm thinking, well, the only people that Jesus didn't show mercy to were the
Well,
unmerciful.
I know. Yeah.
but
Yeah.
but how do you choose clients, and have you had any opinions about
Yeah.
who you give cars to?
Well, we early on developed a little bit of a different model that helps with that. Doesn't completely fix it, but it helps. And that's all of our clients come to us through advocacy. So we don't have a front door in the sense that anybody can ask me for a car, but the answer is always what we work through advocates. So advocates are leaders or volunteers in charities or healthcare providers, churches or ministries, schools, government organizations who have some sort of vested relationship with the applicant. Maybe they are a mentor or they're a teacher or a healthcare provider. Somehow they have
Right.
a connection to that person and they're involved in that person's world, their life, helping them to to move forward or to be as self-sufficient as they can.
Uh-huh.
That person knows the applicant and they can vouch for them and they know, hey, this vehicle is going to have the intended effect. They bring the applicants to us. So,
Yeah.
yeah, a lot of people ask, how do you choose? I'm like, well, it's made a lot easier by I only get people that an advocate would say, hey, we want to bring this person to you. So I like to think on ramp, ultimately, we get to serve the cream of the crop often. We get to serve the people who schools and charities and healthcare people around our community say, wow, this person, they really want to move forward in life, but they need a vehicle. Let's bring them to on ramp. So that's the
Yeah.
fun part is by the time we're meeting the applicant, they already have somebody in their life who vouches for them
Right.
and who is involved with them. So that helps to some extent. I think the pushback I get more is, certainly there's people who ask, how in the world can this be self-sustainable? And, how can you give away cars? That's easy to answer. That works fine. We have a model that works and, I feel like we're getting these people who are doing so well. I think that when what people struggle with is, do you ever have anybody who it goes bad on? Yes, of
Mm.
course. This is ministry
Yeah.
in a broken world. Yeah, we have, despite the systems that
Sure.
we have in place and the advocates that we work with, there are people who will take advantage of it. There are people who will not follow through on what they said they're going to use the vehicle for. There's people who will get themselves into a bad situation and the vehicle will be sold for cash or whatever it is,
Mhm.
or wrecked or something. And when that happens, I think I guess perhaps the response of a lot of Christians is say, I can't believe that was a waste. Why did you give that person a car? How could they do that? And always my response with that is, I'm sad that that happened, but I have to remind myself that that's the nature of how grace works. Grace gives things to
Mhm.
people who are going to abuse it, just like you and I abuse grace every day. So
Yeah.
grace is an abusable thing. Like God freely gives us his blessings, knowing full
Yeah.
well that while we may be appreciative today, we may be total jerks tomorrow. And we're not
Yeah.
always going to make the right decisions. And so I think for on-ramp, our first organizational value is grace. And so when somebody really pushes back, how can you give a car to that person? Or how can you deal with the fact that this went wrong? Just remind them that what we're about is showing the community the grace of God, that he gives freely, that he gives extravagantly, that he gives believing the best about the person, knowing full well that they may not fulfill all their obligations in the
Right.
future. And it
Right.
may be one that you look back on and say, that one didn't work out great, but that's okay because
Yeah.
we do the best that we can, but ultimately we follow a God who is gracious to sinners and fools like we all are. So
Yes.
that's
Gosh, and
usually how I answer it.
isn't love always a gamble? I mean,
Yeah, or it's not
I
love.
mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
right. I mean, I mean, God's the greatest gambler of all. Like, I'm going to send my
I think
one
that's
and
the
only
thing is,
son that you might
yes.
reject. And guess what we did?
Yeah, I think that
So
there's a sense in maybe so much of like the Christian community and the community we live in a college town, where there's this sense that through intelligence and good planning and good clean
yeah.
living, we're going to control the outcomes, and we're going to make
Hmm.
sure that charity is only going to the people who deserve it, and we're all growing and we're all
Yeah.
sanctifying and all that kind of stuff. And if you look back at the Bible, that's like not no, that's not how it works. God
Yeah.
often chooses the unlikely. He often works
Yeah.
through people who you never saw coming, and he often blesses people who he knew full well were going to be unfaithful in the long run. And yet he's still, yeah. I think by the nature of love and grace and charity, it is risky. And if there's no
Yes.
risk, and if you try to program out all the risk, then you're losing that aspect of grace. But you have to balance it with the fact that at the same time, God calls us to be wise. So that whole, okay, I need to be
Right.
wise, but I also need to be gracious. How do I balance that? My take on that is you should always live in tension between those. Like
Sure.
if you choose one over the other, like we're just wise programming, we're gonna have the plan. No one outside this plan is ever gonna be accepted. Or if you just we're never gonna think about anything, we're just gonna give with no evaluating, no impact data, none of the research. That's not good either. So we try to live in that balance. We frequently have meetings as a team. Okay, so what went well and what didn't, and what can we learn from it?
Yeah.
And that's great. But I think that's a big thing of I think it bothers me, and this isn't a tangent, but it's taking a look. It does bother me when I feel like people who are it's not just Christians, but they're in the position of donor. So
Okay.
they are not just Christians, but for whatever circumstances in their life, they're also financially successful. So
Hmm.
they're thinking, you want me to give money to this person, you want me to give this asset to this person. Many have a great heart and great attitude to this, but sometimes you have somebody who's like, well, what's happening here is there's somebody who's made bad decisions. They were bad,
Hmm.
and we
Hmm.
want to give this gracious gift so maybe they can be saved and they can get better and they can be more like us, and I think there's that sense. And what my the primary thing I try to get across is actually 2/3 of the people we serve, as best we can tell, are already believers. And of those 2/3, I would guess half of those, so a third of the clients we serve are more mature than you or I. Like they're very godly
Yes.
people with deep faith who
Yes.
have sacrificed more than we have ever sacrificed.
Yes.
And why they're in a position asking me for a vehicle is because life is hard and they
Yes.
didn't do something to deserve that. That's what the Bible taught. Like so many times people face hardship because the world is broken, not because they made worse decisions than you did. So I think that's more the conversation that we have is just helping people understand charity is not because you're the good person giving money to the person who was dumb and made bad decisions and now they need to reform their life. Like
Yes.
occasionally, yeah, but so
Yes.
often, no, they're actually as mature, more mature than you or I. They just didn't have the resources we did. They didn't
Yes.
have the circumstances we did. We didn't create the circumstances in our lives that lead to all this wealth. We did the best we could with what we had. They
Right.
did the best they could with what they had. And the
Right.
reality is because we live in a broken world, they have great need. And
Right.
so, for me, that's more the common thing is reminding people. Actually, most of the folks we serve are believers, and this is not evangelistic charity. This is where the church is called so often in the New Testament. You care for people in the church above and beyond. When it's believers who lack the basic necessities of life, you sell what you have and you give it to them because that's what the church is meant to do. So
Yeah.
I think that's a big re-education process. Is often people who are
Yeah.
facing poverty, it's not because they're immature. It's because they've faced circumstances and difficulties that we haven't.
Yes. And our society is filled with so many groups that face oppression. And if that if you don't believe that, then it's likely that your circle isn't wide enough. And
Oh,
so
yeah.
I feel like there's this holy charge to get to know people that are nothing like you.
Yes.
And I love that, that you have this advocate system, like I feel convicted. I need to get to know more people who might need a car.
Yeah.
But as you're talking, I'm just thinking about how we love certitudes because they make us,
Hmm.
feel so comfortable when the truth is control and certainty are a myth every single time. I
Hmm.
mean, every single time we map out
Yes.
our lives how we would like them to go, and it hardly ever happens that way. So
Hmm.
it should be no surprise that there are surprises in in your
Hmm.
work. So how many cars has On Ramp given away so far?
Yeah, I don't know. Surprisingly enough, I know the clients. So, well, the issue is we have a couple different programs. So we have given cars, reliable cars, to we did number 78 end of last week. So 78 so far client families. So that some
Uh-huh.
of them are single, many are have kids or are married. Some of those clients we've given multiple vehicles to because we do a two-step program where if often, and this won't be a surprise, often, particularly a woman will be brought to us who is fleeing an abuser, but she doesn't yet have legal
Mhm.
protection. So I
Mm.
can't give her a very valuable vehicle yet because that abuser theoretically could get it. So we'll do a two-step program where we'll give her a temporary vehicle, and then once she has legal protection, we'll dispose of it and give her a long-term vehicle. So we've done that a few times. We also, a unique part of our model, we warranty and repair, do all the maintenance on every vehicle for 12 months. Because the intention is
Wow.
the vehicle's a great gift, but we want to give you a year where you're
Yeah.
connected to us. So we're
Wow.
connecting with you every couple months, but also you can focus all your spare funds on savings. That's a big thing we measure is the growth of your family's savings account from when we meet to when the 12 months is done. So we want everything you would have spent for maintenance to go into that savings account. We'll foot that bill. So usually that works really well, but on 3 or 4 occasions, the vehicle itself failed, and so we just completely replaced it. So we've done in the mid to high 80s, I think, of total number of vehicles so far. But like I said, I
Wow.
don't really count vehicles; I just count the families.
So I I would love to know as people are listening and growing convicted, how can we I know that Brazos Valley Gives is coming up.
Mhm.
Um, what do you need and how can we support you?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we always do need funds because giving vehicles away is capital intensive. So
Yeah.
vehicles cost a good bit of money to purchase. They've gone up. I think the latest figures are 21% over the last 12 months is the increase in price of the average vehicle in the United States. So inflation is hitting vehicle prices greatly. So funds are definitely helpful, both to purchase vehicles, but then also that 12 months that we do all the maintenance. We get
Yeah.
great discounts. We have amazing automotive partners that help us in town, but it's not free. So it's reduced
Yeah.
price, but there's still price. So donations help dramatically. Almost all the money that comes in goes to either purchase vehicles or repair those vehicles for families in need. I think then, besides that, for folks that have a vehicle that still has life in it that they want to donate, or maybe they're thinking of trading it in and would offer it to us at the trade-in price, so lower price, we'd love to talk about that. All that stuff is on our homepage if you want to give financially or donate a vehicle. But just as big as that, I think we're always looking for people who want to volunteer that have kind of some unique skill sets. So you don't have to be both the pastor and automotive engineer, but we do have kind of specific skill sets. Like we're always looking for um, faithful Christian social workers. That
Mhm.
is, oh my gosh, that's such a valuable asset to the Christian community. Christians who have also entered and become experts in the world of social work. So that could
Yeah.
be an actual licensed social worker, or maybe somebody who was very involved with like an early Head Start program or a medical program where you involved with people who were struggling with poverty. You have so much knowledge that most people don't about how families can be helped, how individuals can be helped through the system. You have an ability to assess needs that I don't
Yeah.
have because hey,
Yeah.
if you're saying this, it probably means this. You probably also need this or this. Your children may need this. I don't know
Right.
those things. That's such a
Yeah.
specialized field. So we're always looking for believers who come out of a social work or working with the poor background. So we'd love to talk to you if you have that. you happen to be a person who is into cars and wants to help us find cars and move them around town and detail them and prep them, that's always good. People who are just good at getting stories out. We are very blessed to have very good stories. I'm not
Hmm.
sure what it is about the gift of an automobile, but it tends to create a very powerful story about life before and after. So
Yeah.
people who are
Yeah.
skilled at telling stories in creative ways, that is always valuable. So I think volunteering would be amazing. So all that is on our website if you'd like to volunteer with us, or you can contact me. And then I think that the other thing that I would say, this is more of like a soapbox thing. So it's less helping us directly and more um, anyone who can be an advocate to the community, especially the Christian community, about the needs that are out there, broader than just automobiles, but just people in general.
Yes.
Getting the word out is huge. I was so shocked to learn. I always thought that Brazos County, which is where you and I live, so I knew, there's certainly aspects of poverty around, but it seems like we're a wealthy academic community.
Hmm.
Yeah, there's poverty, but it's mostly college students because they're poor. It wasn't until I looked into the data and the census that came out that said, actually, you remove all the college students, it's still 21% of our county is poor. 21% of the people who are not students who live in just Brazos County, just Bryan College Station around Texas A&M, that there's so much money here, qualify as impoverished by the federal standards. That
Yeah.
blew my mind. And the reality is, so many of us can go about our days from home to work to store to home again, to Kyle Field to see a game, to the store to get groceries, and never see it.
Right.
We never see them. We never interact with them. And so it's so easy to go through our daily life unaware that 1 out of 5 of our fellow citizens just in this county, this little county, are impoverished right now. And then
Right.
if you take Texas as a whole, it's about the same number for kids. It's about 21% of Texas children are impoverished. So I think that's the other thing that I would say that's probably bigger than on-ramp, bigger than any particular needs that we have, is just getting that word out there and helping people understand that poverty is a major issue. A whole lot of those folks who are poor are our brothers and sisters in Christ, who I think
Yeah.
we're morally obligated to, whether they go to our
Yes.
churches or not. Our churches are tend to be very segregated socioeconomically. So
Right.
you either, I think for most of us, we either go to a rich church that has resources but doesn't have impoverished people, or a poor church that doesn't have resources that has lots of impoverished people, and we never get together and we never share bread together, we never live life together. And so it's just so easy to go through life without any awareness of the incredible need that's out there. And I would say that's the biggest thing that I think is needed right now, is for more believers to speak up about that, to get involved in it in some form or
Yes.
fashion, find whatever your passion is, whatever your
Right.
particular skill enables you to do, and do something.
Yeah.
There's so many unmet needs
Right.
right now, that no one's chasing. And
Yeah.
somebody needs to get excited about how to create a viable alternative to predatory lending and go create it
Hmm.
and chase it. Somebody needs
Yes.
to figure out, how do we create a viable childcare program that people can afford who are impoverished? Go
Yep.
chase that. Like, I think if more believers would get excited to chase after some problem that resonates with their heart and figure out creative ways to solve it, we could change this county in
Yeah,
really
we
good
look
ways.
to Jesus to know how to organize our lives. We look to Jesus to
Mhm.
know how to live our lives, and we can see that he loves everyone to the point of dying for them, but in
Mhm.
his ministry, he really went out of his way to help very
Yes.
specific groups of people, and it was the poor. Um,
Yes.
Thank you so much, Blake, for bringing a little bit of his kingdom here on earth. I'm so grateful to know you. I'm so excited to yell about on ramp with you. I'm inspired by your work. I'm so grateful for your example of how you're living life and making our community better. Will you tell everyone the website, the actual website, and if you have anything
Sure.
on social media, how to follow you, how to give?
Yes. So everything is OnRamp TX, OnRamp Texas. So just
Okay.
OnRampTX. Our website is onramptx.org. And then our social media handles are all OnRampTX. So Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, that's what they all are. So we post stories frequently there. So if you'd like to, the nice thing on both the website and social media, even if you just, all you want to do is just know more about what's going on, we try when we tell the story to give, to whatever extent the client gives us permission to share their story, we will share details about it that will help you understand what what those who are struggling financially, what they really face in day-to-day life. So
Mhm.
I would definitely recommend familiarizing yourself with the stories, just so you better understand the people that are your neighbors, whether you see them or not on a daily basis.
Right. Right. Thank you so much, Blake. So
Thank you,
so
Allison. Yeah.
cheering for you always. Love it.
Well, thank you for the time. This is fun.
You bet. Santa Clara Design Boutique provides accessible and affordable ways to create beautiful, sacred spaces in your everyday. Creating spaces that reflect what is true and good and beautiful is near and dear to owner and lead designer Lauren Gouldy's heart. Visit Santa Clara Design online at santaclaradesign.com to find a wide variety of Catholic art, prints, canvases, stickers, printables, tees, mugs, totes, and more. Sinner Saint Sister listeners get 10% off of their print and sticker orders with code Sinner Saint Sister. Sometimes on a really hectic day, I'll head over to @SantaClaraDesign on Instagram to scroll and just take in all of the piece. Head over there on Instagram and Facebook @SantaClaraDesign to join their email list. Hi, Beefy!
We're back!
We're back! Did you know we'd be back?
I don't know. Did you know we'd be back? I mean, one of my favorite parts about being your beef is that you could tell me that you're moving to New Zealand or joining the circus, and I'd just slow nod and then eventually get on board. Full of surprises.
Such a faithful friend, Beefy. I love that about you. You're always so encouraging. It's like it's true. You might give me a slow nod, but you're always curious about how I came to said crazy decision. This doesn't necessarily surprise me, but I am surprised that we are as fancy as we are. So that's fun.
Yeah. I'm glad we're back.
I was listening to some of our segments from before, and I fell in love with us so much. I was like, oh my gosh, I want to be their friend. So thanks for being on. I love your perspectives. This is going to be great.
Thanks, Beefy, even though it makes me sweat a little bit. I find it highly ironic that for a living, I stand up and speak publicly and answer hard questions spontaneously, but this is what will have me sweating through my shirt right now. I think it's talking about matters of the heart is a lot more complicated
than the law.
Yeah.
You're such a good lawyer and beefy co-host. Okay, so since we have some new listeners, we do need to take a second to explain beefy, because we only call each other beefy, and I imagine that that's confusing. If you were to call me Allison, I would feel really upset by that. I would feel like you hit me in the face.
It's jarring. My kids even are a little confused when I call you anything. Like, who's Allison?
Right. Okay, so when we were in the 3rd grade, we had the James Avery heart necklace that's split in half. So the words best friend are split in half.
Right. And so I had beef fry and you had Saint End or Street End or same.
Same, yeah. St. Francis might beg to differ, but street, saint, what have you. Yeah, but so beef fry got shortened to beef, which then affectionately became beefy, beefinator, what have you. So,
which is extra funny since I'm a vegetarian.
Oh, right. And it can be a noun or an adjective or a verb. It can take all sorts of forms.
I feel like too much too soon is off-putting. We have to save something for the people.
Oh, okay. Yes, true. Okay, we can ease them in to beefy. Okay, so anyways, okay, did you love Blake? Did you love On Ramp? Oh my gosh.
I loved him. I mean, so the world's falling apart, right? And there's just so much to be upset about. And I feel like my biggest disappointment with just people right now is this oversimplification of complex problem. I feel like I'm seeing it all over the place. I don't think people mean to be jerks, or not everyone is a jerk, but it's like all these big problems require so much of us, and we're not willing to do that. So they either paralyze us, like it's too big to address it at all, or we oversimplify them so that they seem more manageable or to make them someone else's problem. And I feel like Blake just has a gift for looking a complex problem in the face, not being overwhelmed by it, getting to know it and the people that it affects really, really well.
Yeah, that's really good.
And then using his gifts to fix it without oversimplifying it or minimizing it.
Yeah. Okay, so what would be the oversimplification here? Like if humanity can be a little distressing right now, like what is the oversimplified human response?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know. I say, they say people that are struggling or lazy because it's a simpler explanation than looking at the broken systems and trying to find a place to step in and roll up your sleeves, right?
Yeah. So I'm watching this show right now on Netflix. It's called Maids, and I highly recommend it. Actually, not to you, Beef. Sorry. I love you, but you're dealing with a lot in your regular life just through fostering journey, and you do not need this kind of entertainment. It's just very dramatic. But but what I love about the show is that it does this really good job about showing how living below the poverty line is so stinking precarious. It's like one tiny misfortune just completely compounds another, and then you don't have any money to absorb any setback. And so this main character, it's just so enlightening because she's never not aware of exactly how much money she has to the penny. In fact, they somehow artfully do this, but they show a little ticker in the screen of, she had to fill up with gas. That's, there's another, $8 off or whatever. And so I feel like that there are so many people, you're talking about people who are oversimplifying this and maybe calling people lazy or whatever. And so I think that those are people who either don't remember well enough what it's like to be in that predicament or have never been in that predicament. And they're taking support systems for granted. They're taking the fact that they have a kind neighbor or a reliable mom or, the whole reason I brought this up is because her one saving grace was that she had a car. Her transportation was like this huge problem solver in so many areas. And then there's this part of the show where that gets taken away from her, and it is devastating. And so anyways, all of these things were making me think of all that. And I think you're right. I think people can either not remember or have never experienced it and oversimplify.
Yeah. There was one part during the interview with Blake where you said something like, the world's inclined to think that like this person shouldn't have what I have until they become like me. And I just wanted to like put that on a billboard because I just realized like everything in the world that makes me want to move to New Zealand right now is smugness. There's just so much smugness.
Smug. Yeah. 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 Smug. I feel like smugness, or is it haughty? I don't know. I mean, there's probably a lot of synonyms that we could go to, but it's just not the poverty of spirit that we're called to. Father Gregory Boyle is one of my role models, and he says that the principal suffering of the poor is not that they can't pay a bill but it's shame. It's like this global failure of the whole self. And so people that aren't sympathizing with that and the smugness of even criticizing it or holy moly laughing at it, it's just not the poverty of spirit we're called to.
I was going to say, you showed me a couple of screenshots lately of some conversations that you were in where you were advocating for people who were struggling. I mean, after having some very unholy feelings and wanting to, punch some faces, I sat down and prayed for them. I mean, I'm truly not saying that in a haughty way, but I was like, I just need to pray for all of us.
Yeah. That's so nice, Beef. I love that you're always in my corner. You always have my side. I'm so grateful. You are the absolute beefiest. See? Adjective. There it is. There's the adjective. We eased them in. All right. Thanks, Beef. Love you so much.
Love you, Beef.
Pink Salt Riot exists to empower women to radically stand in the truth of what God says about them, that they are beloved and that they are worthy exactly as they are. I know that it's important to me to shed a veneer of performance, to be able to show up authentically as I am, and to live into the mission that God has exactly for me. And all of Pink Salt Riot products are created to be reminders of that and to anchor our daily lives right back to it. Pink Salt Riot creates jewelry and greeting cards and lifestyle goods and gifts that anyone who loves Jesus would love. Follow them at Pink Salt Riot on Instagram and find them at pinksaltriot.com. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope that you enjoyed our time together. I know that I did. In order to spend more time together, you can hit subscribe and follow along wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also follow along on YouTube at youtube.com/Allison Sullivan, to follow along on social media at Allison M. Sully on Instagram, and then just for a little fun, Sullivan Family TikTok. All right, guys, see you next time. Have a happy week.
Today's show was a production of Allison Sullivan in conjunction with the Forte Catholic Podcast Network. For more great Catholic podcasts, head on over to fortecatholic.com/podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts.